Ta-da. Smile for the camera. Hello and welcome to Lockdown Still Life Show and Tell Inspirational Books Part 4. So this is after our collective exhibition as part of Creative Hull. We're all tired. We're all glad we made it. We nearly melted at the picnic, but it was lovely. It was lovely for everyone to come out and join us and kind of look at some people who walked past, but it was too hot to do anything. So today we have Michelle and Sarah talk about their inspirational books, and it is a hard act to follow because some of the presentations were truly in themselves inspirational and have given me a long list of more books to read, which I love. So especially as I'm going on holiday on Saturday. Well, holiday. I'm going to Germany on Saturday. So my plan is to sit on the balcony and read, which will be lovely. As well as actually another plan is I want to connect with some of the local artists. And if you have any ideas, I really, I think I want to collect more stories. I think it's been so interesting to kind of hear some of the stories that we collected, especially, while installing the exhibition and the Whispering Window was running all the time. And although I'd listened to all of them, by picking out different parts, you kind of hear it differently, so certain things jumped out at me, and I just thought actually how incredible it is and how, beautiful some of the contributions and the comments were as part of those reflections. And as I mentioned before, we still want to kind of continue recording here as well. So Michelle and David and Sarah Pennington, it'd be really, really great to capture those. But I think it'll be nice to kind of reach out to a different country. So, sorry, I'm digressing. That is something I might do while I'm there. So,
just on that note, Marianne, isn't there a way of capturing the voices of people that have not contributed from the wider group? Isn't there a way of them contributing comments or remarks or, ideas, from the wider group that don't normally contribute in the same way? I'm sure there must be a way.
Yeah.
You can just send a voice or somebody do an image.
Absolutely. And I think
all the other members that haven't been in the exhibition haven't contributed. Yeah. That'd be a good way to capture that if you can, and if it's possible. I don't know.
No, definitely. And, when we put the call out, there were a few people who, only kind of contributed a little bit, like there's somebody from London who said she was really keen. And there were a few that we just haven't really managed to actually capture. And I think there's somebody from Germany who lives locally. So she contributed quite regularly. So I'm definitely going to kind of meet up with her and see whether,
It could be just like one sentence, what it's meant to be part of the group. It could just be as simple as that, really.
Yeah.
Just a broader opinion of
yeah, definitely. So, yes. So always, keep going, keep moving, keep sharing and having ideas. So great. And by the way, before I forget, so all your items that your masked items, I've taken them to Shirethorn House. So, you can either kind of drop in before that, and, they're safe. They're with Barney in his office. So, you can either pop in anytime when Barney's around, or maybe when we all meet and pick them up. Or if you kind of want them earlier, I can pick them up and drop them off or anything. Just let me know. But they are safe, including your hat, Roger. I just couldn't bring myself to chuck it away.
Told you to throw that, odd job style.
Who ends up picking it up?
Until your books as well, because there's quite a few of the listen books, isn't it? So yeah, they're all, and all the books that you've contributed, so they're all there. So let me know if you're happy to wait or if you want them back in any other way. Good, okay. Sorry, that was a long introduction. Okay, so Michelle, would you mind going first, and then Sarah, followed by you?
Okay. Right. I chose to pick two influential books and show you how they helped me. When it was decided we present something about the books that had influenced us, I began rather as Julia did. I thought of the first books that had meant something, and at first that was easy. The older I became, the more books I thought of. But because different books mean different things at different times, I found it an impossible task. Listening to David's presentation 2 weeks ago, focusing on one writer, inspired me to look at things in a new way. And later that night came the news of an almost catastrophic disaster when Jill thought she'd lost her entire thesis. Then I knew the 2 books I wished to bring to your attention. It was 1995 and I was happy with the final work for my MA graduation show. But I had no idea how to tackle the thesis/project report. I'd been keeping a book in which I collected possible quotes of poetry, prose, photographs and art reproductions that might have some bearing, however nebulous, on my theme of rock pools, and that was as far as I'd got. As time went by, I found myself unwilling to be tied to so narrow a theme, and it expanded in the reading and written sense to include the symbolic meanings of rock, water and their physical qualities. The practical work explored dissolving boundaries, mutability and uncertainty. I did not wish to write an academic paper, especially as the course leader had damned everything before the postmodernism and rated crafts as low value compared to fine art. I wanted to refute her narrow understanding and make reference to everything and anything that had mattered to me. Then one of the tutors, who in truth had not been, doesn't want to go down, that's it, hadn't been a good teacher at all, told me to look at Italo Calvino's 6 memos for the next millennium. I got them because I was at the University of Hull, so I could easily get them out from there. And the essays are absolutely brilliant. But it was the way he titled his essays that excited me. His titles related to qualities of writing in literature. But I could use this device to examine the qualities of stone, water and colour in terms of physical, scientific and geological, plus references to myth and religion. So that was his, and he also wrote a very slight essay. There were actually supposed to be more than the 5, but one of them got lost. So that was one thing sorted out for the project notes. So thank you, Italo Calvino. As for the arrangement and organisation of the complete document, I looked no further than Virginia Woolf's novel The Waves. There are 5 main characters that she follows from childhood to death. Chapters concerning her characters' lives are punctuated by poetic, descriptive passages of land and seascapes, with special reference to the sea. The cycle of the moon waxing and waning, pulling the tides, reflected time passing, echoing their lives. My high tide sections dealt with the practical work I was doing or hoped to achieve in the future. And as Woolf did, I sought in this way to give the project notes a dimension of time. Another suggestion I followed was writing episodes in fiction. This gave me enormous freedom. Giambattista Vico, 1688 to 1774, defined imaginative memory as imagination is the memory rearranged. It was the perfect vehicle for me to introduce poetry and myth. And in my own text, the pools constantly hidden or exposed by tides echo the prose that ebbs and flows between past and present. Disjointed fragments of memory occur when the tide leaves the rocks exposed, the pools left like scrying bowls of clear water, to garner, as seers once did, intuitive understanding. I made photocopies of sea creatures on plastic film to visually continue the metaphor, and poetic sections were actually printed on typing paper, so that you could actually see writing or images vaguely underneath. And the edges of all the paper was torn to refer to shale cliffs. So as far as possible, visual appearances reflected the subject matter of my project. I couldn't be sure it would be acceptable. But I sent in the 2 copies anyway, and at least it wasn't an anonymous manuscript. I needn't have worried. They sent me a letter of commendation, so it just goes to show that breaking rules can be beneficial. So this is a section of it where you can see I've got images underneath, and it keeps on.
Sorry, Michelle, I don't think we can see what you can see. We literally can just see a very pretty, colorful background. You might, when you share a screen, you might have to click on a different window.
Right, so let's see. I've got new share, stop share. No, that would be stop sharing.
Maybe stop share and click share again, but then look at the different screens that you've got. And on, kind of, because usually when it asks you to share, you have a selection between different screens.
Oh, I didn't.
I know, okay.
I might just have to read it. That's my normal anyway.
No, but try, you want to try and share again? Maybe it comes up now.
Wait a minute.
And see the images.
It isn't, is it? It's still just on me. Turned it off.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Oh, that's really annoying. I know what I can do. I've got it here, so I can at least show you a little bit about what I was doing. So
Michelle, if you do that, could you stop sharing the screen, because then we can make you big?
Yeah. Stop share. There you are.
I'll
it's only that I've written it all out, so I'll have to go back in a minute. This was the one I did, and I had an old printer, so I had a lot of fun seeing what would actually go through it or not to present. So this is where I started using tracing paper so that you could see through it.
Can you hold it up higher? Can you hold it up higher? Yeah, okay.
So that when you opened it, you could actually see the image.
Nice.
And then, wait a minute, find another bit of it. This was one thing that got me excited. In fact, it was I started doing drawings from biology slides, and I'd seen this in a book, and it turned out to be very similar to the actual rock pools that I'd photographed in the South Bay. So I actually found that quite exciting. This is just another of the ones where I printed on gel. Can you see? You can just about see the print underneath. It's much clearer, obviously, if it's like this. So then it was on tracing paper, and then it was on just the photocopies of actual things. I'll just go back to my stop sharing for a minute, and I'll start just reading again. So that's it. If I can't make it, of course, go up and down now. It doesn't want to do that. There it is. I'll just drag it across. Sorry about this. Slight hitch in showing it to you. I can't do it. I'll just have to. So what I did is I went through. I was using. I got Virginia Woolf's idea, and what I did with all the poetic bits was actually print them onto tracing paper, and I used things like thinking about poetry and how people looked in poetry, but then it could be it could be memories, or it could be things like the map of the earth, or just saying, what do you see? And I looked at I looked in one of my chapters about stone and the properties of stone. And that led me to all kinds of things, which was wonderful. I really enjoyed making it, but it's absolutely stuck, so I shall have to carry on anyway without showing you. And so the main chapters could be about stone, but they also they had to bring in postmodernism, which I really don't like, because to me, it's you can't remember what the end of the sentence is. You start at the beginning and you can't remember the end, or I never could. But the more I looked, the more I thought about how I could produce this book. So I'd looked into geology quite a bit, and looking at the way that rocks disintegrate into sand, and the sand itself is full of sea creatures, so everything's becoming something else all the time, was very much central to what I thought. So what I did from the Christmas onwards, every bit of paper that came into the house, just newspapers or bills, I didn't shred the bills, but the envelopes or things like that, I actually mushed them all up and made them into papier-mâché. And within the papier-mâché, I also put things like you would find in the shale cliffs near Whitby, where you can dig in and you find fossils. So I had all these things going on in the book. And I learnt so much, because I came across botanists I'd never heard of. My husband had a set of books, and they were edited by a man called Kepesh. And they're all essays, and they were like having, one could be on actual science, another one could be on biology, and another one could be on time. So I actually used a lot from these books to put into the thesis. And I brought in all the stuff that the course leader hated. So it was talking about colour. I used quotes from Howard Hodgkin, who said that the British don't like colour, they're frightened of it. Or I used Hockney and used some of his mushed paper, the swimming pools. Or when I was in Maine, I went visiting for a little while around this time, and I had friends in Maine. I'd never met them, but they were friends of friends, and I went up to see, and they had this wonderful art room with a very, very modern photocopier. And I found that they also had drawers full of sea fish and urchins and you name it, and they had it. And I just spread them on the photocopier, and I made copies of those that went onto the gel, so that I could put that in as well. So all the time you're sort of looking and half seeing like you are in rock pools. And I enjoyed it enormously. I can't tell you how much, because I had 14th century Italian painters next to somebody like Hockney, or I'd have, anything you could think of. They were all, whenever they came into my head, I did them. So I also had been very impressed by the plaster casts of the poor people in Pompeii, and I brought them in as well. And I just tried to knit it all together. So it was interesting, and it was interesting in images and ideas, I suppose, interested in the imaging, and then interesting in what I hoped I was trying to do with the presentation of the actual thesis. And the only thing that went wrong for me was that I could have written on, and we were only supposed to write 8,000 words. So it wasn't really very much at all, and I hated coming to an end of it. But my final show was the ones I'd made with papier-mâché. I actually put in plastic boxes, and I hung them from fishing line and fishing hooks so that you could walk all round them to signify high tide and low tide. So they weren't just flat on the wall. So I just had a very exciting time, but I really wouldn't have got to how to present this thing without Calvino and Virginia Woolf. So there you are. I'm sorry I couldn't show you the photographs. As always, I had them here, but they just didn't come up for you. So that's the end. And now you're all struck dumb.
I like that quote you said about imagination being
Nice thinking.
memory rework, something like that, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had quite a lot of quotations in there like that because they made me rethink the way I normally thought.
Well, I liked the transparencies, because when you talked about those, it took me back. I think the only reason I managed to pass my biology exam is because I like illustrations. But what I loved most were the books where you got layers and layers of different transparencies that layered on top of one another to create the whole. So when you brought up that connection between the cellular structure of something and the similarity to the things you were seeing in the rock pool, I really loved that, because looking through things, I don't know if anybody can see that, but looking through things absolutely fascinates me. And when you said you'd put your things in boxes and so you could walk round it, I totally got that, because I've been frustrated all my life with the edge of a canvas, not being able to contain things and want to make them into screens and want them to be three-dimensional, even though I'm not a sculptor as such. I've always felt that, and I totally related to what you were talking about there, Michelle. I could almost feel the same things that I feel. And the way you'd used it, and the following the trail thing, I love that too. The way you've gone through books that inspired you. And I mean, most people think when you do that, you're going off at a tangent, but actually I think tangents are very important to pull things in from lots of different places to make them work for you and give you the inspiration that you need. So I loved it, Michelle.
Well, in the boxes too, I'd collected pebbles off the beach and I stacked them up. You know how cairns are done as reminders of the dead.
Yeah.
I'd stacked them up like that as well, and I had a lot of things, and to a degree it was inspired by my husband suddenly dying after I'd just done 2 terms on the MA, because he was really young, and coming to terms with that. My kids had gone, you know, I'd lost my job, I had to sell the house. And it was coming to terms and then making it bigger than rock pools, to thinking about the erosion and what happens and how things become other things all the time. You know, even if they're wearing away, they're other things, they've been transformed. I think it helped me a lot. And also I was very lucky, I had my mentor was a woman, and I really can't remember her surname, called Anne, and she was a painter. And she said to me, when you look down into a rock pool, what do you see? And that's what started, because sometimes when you look down, you don't see the rock pool through the water. You actually see the sky. And you've got to take your eyes and put it in a sort of different thing to then see below the surface. So this is where it all started coming from. And the first lot of work I did was layers of corrugated paper stuck together. So I could sculpt them out and put fossils in or other bits that I could find. And it was much more exciting, because it wasn't just doing flat drawings. You know, I started off before Mel died with flat drawings, and now I don't seem to be able to do anything but mixed media, because I want to find the wire and the other bits that you pick up. It's more interesting to me. And that's where it all came from. But I really couldn't have written the thesis if it hadn't been for that Italian book of essays and Virginia Woolf, because I just didn't know how to draw it all together.
Michelle, I thought that was...
I really love that, Michelle, and I'm also interested in the capturing the but that's the critical fish thing about above, below, at the edge, is in that surface. You've got what's above and what's beneath captured on the surface of the water or through the water. I also think of rock pools as bordered, aren't they? They've got a boundary, so they almost somehow making a connection with that and the picture surface or the picture space, because you have got a bounded shape. And the other thing that I really liked when you were talking, or certainly rang a few bells with me, is the visuality of words. Like, words, they work because they've got, I don't know, they've got symbolic, cultural meaning. I don't know how to say that, literary meaning, but also there's something to see and they mean something even when we can't read them. So I guess some of your words, where they're layered or whether they're slightly concealed or obscured, they still mean something. They still carry a meaning.
Well, then you could turn onto them and you could see them.
Yeah.
But it was this idea of the layering of ideas, you know. It became an incredibly exciting time for me, and I don't think I'll ever do as exciting work again as I did with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so lucky with the mentor, because when I'd started, before Mel died, I had this man who actually knew about the Bath Academy of Art. But he said to me, when I was doing, first of all, I doing these botanical drawings, and then I went on to doing more from the rock pools themselves. And he said, "Oh, this isn't any good. You should be cutting canvas up and cut it and sticking it together." And that wasn't me at all. And it really annoyed me. And then when we got this woman who had actually trained as a social worker, who actually found it really odd why we all wanted to see images when she was talking to artists or sculptors or photographers. That's why I enjoyed writing the thesis really much more, because I just felt I was putting my tongue out at her. I don't know what she thought of it, but the others liked it.
Michelle, could I just say, I think you mentioned before about not being a great fan of postmodernism, and I'm not really qualified to, talk about postmodernism literature. I do know about it in art, design, and architecture. I think it was a necessity, really, because it had become so refined and slick, and so we had to go somewhere from that, and then exact antithesis of that was to go into postmodernism, where everything goes. It's like a collage of multiple ideas, multiple materials, multiple mediums.
Which was what I was doing in there.
I was just going to say to you, it's exactly, you have got a postmodernistic, postmodern mind, really. Everything you do is postmodern, where you do incongruous things together, in collaging them or using them, in combination, which probably wouldn't normally go together, and that's what postmodernism is.
I think it was the books I was kicking most, Graham, because
it's the words, not the images of
they're so pretentious a lot of the time, and they string these long sentences together, and you think, my God, what did it begin with? So it isn't so much the work, which, yes, came out of that. It was some of the books we were asked to read. And I mean, the course leader, she was interested in people like Orlan, who made art from having her face, the plastic surgery all the time, and that's what her art was. Or they were all they were all lesbians. I'm nothing against lesbians. But when that's all you're looking at all the time, and then she's pooing things like 14th century art, it's all got a place. So
you are very much a postmodern lady, really. That's, I always think of you as that. I always think you're a little bit, you've got like slightly punk, experimental way of, I think it's great to see that. I just love that about you, really. So you have got a postmodern aesthetic, but also a postmodern personality, I think. And I love that.
Well, I get the impression what you don't like, Michelle, is you are very open. You've entertained all the ideas that we've had. You've listened to people, you've read books, and I think what you didn't like is when people are so stereotyped in their views that they won't extend themselves. And there's quite a lot of that I think perhaps Jill was talking about when she was talking about going down the sort of academic rabbit hole, I seem to remember you were talking about, where people become so narrow in their views that they won't entertain, oh, but this is good. It may not be what I, what I do, but I'm interested in it. And I think that is the problem, that there is an awful lot of people going, oh, well, that doesn't fit what we're doing now, so it's pointless, which is ridiculous.
Well, I think that's why I love this group, because whoever speaks, they're showing us something different. You could never find everything that this group brings up. So I find you all so interesting and so exciting. Certainly, makes me sort of get all, nearly
listening to you has made me think of some other things, actually, about transparency in the rock pools. It's fascinating, those sort of things, because I've started mucking about with some new stuff, and it's quite inspiring to hear people talk about the way they approach something. And I like it when people approach things differently to me, because I've had enough of me. I quite like hearing new things that make me go, oh, and start me thinking in a different way. And
I suppose that one of the things I don't think any of us like is an orthodoxy. I don't know if that's the right word, like a set thing in stone to look up to, or a standard. I don't think any of us, I might be a bit presumptuous, but I don't think any of us like that. We all like take a bit from here or a bit from there. And what I really liked about yours, Michelle, another of things I really liked was that sense of change. You were rock pools, and that space is so much about transition and things moving from one place to another and then changing form. And so, and you talked about that in relation to a very key moment. Like I couldn't help but think about, your husband and his passing and those changes as well. That's very powerful. And then in relation to language as well, language, I can remember, who was it? Who was that artist who was at Humber Street Gallery recently? Oh, Leo Fitzmaurice.
Yeah.
I can remember him talking about language as being glacial, like as moving and changing and accumulating meaning as it moves forward. So it's that sense of changing and appearing and then moving on in a different form to a different place. And that doesn't fit with having an orthodoxy, having a set of things that you look up to or measure things by. Obviously, except for Duchamp, he's an exception, but yeah. So does that make sense, Michelle?
Yeah, and it gave me chance as well to bring in my poets. I had a lot of quotes from different artists, to back up my arguments. But it was so enjoyable. I can't really explain how enjoyable it was, and I got more and more excited as I did it. And then I think, I can only do 8,000 words. And we were told we mustn't do more. And then I found later some of them had gone on to 16,000 words, because they hadn't noticed or hadn't done the word count. But I suppose it was as well because I was trying to integrate everything, including myself. So anyway, thank you.
I think the thing is, you probably went to the most radical modernist school, Britain's ever produced, really. In the 60s. I think I was looking back at some of the work just this morning, and really it's as good as it gets, in the British modernism, the work from that period. So I guess, that's why things need to change, because it got so good, of such great quality, but in a very, very, almost like a school style, really. With brutalism and modern, it just became too.
It didn't come across like that, though, Graham. In the last year, Gillian just said to us, well, you've got to find your own style now. Go away and find your style. And we'd had Howard Hodgkin who said, thou shalt not paint anyway except like this. And I couldn't tell my painting from somebody stood next to me because it was like that.
Yeah. It gets to the point where something's got to give, something's got to change. And
then it was the 70s, and then by the time you got to the late 60s, of course, students started rebelling against that tight mode.
That was postmodernism in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Exactly it.
I'm
Yeah, so-
afraid to say there are quite a few tutors I've come across, in particular names not to be mentioned, who've worked in life drawing classes. And if you're not careful, the whole class starts producing life drawings that all look exactly like the tutor. He wants you to, you know, do a you and you glow or whatever. And you end up with all these paintings that are exactly the same because they've learned a particular technique instead of going from a heartfelt place of art, which I think is, and some of the best people I've seen work in life classes have been somebody like my friend Peter Coates I mentioned, who one day decided to take a saucepan in and stand back to front to the model and paint the reflection of the model in his saucepan. And he did things like that all the time. And I think the tutor at the time recognised he was good, but at the same time, anybody who gave an inch would end up doing a painting that was exactly like his painting.
Maggie Hamblin was like that. I mean, I went to life classes when I had the kids were very little, and we were in London just for a short time, and I found they had a creche and a playgroup. So I could take them along, but I don't drive, I had no car. They were still in terry nappies, and we were on transport, and I could just about manage a pencil and some paper, and I got so frustrated. This is how I started collages. I started going down the rubbish bins to pull out and then see how much you could get away with no line and just a shape, so that it started being seen in the eye of the observer what wasn't really there, because they were adding to it in their head and how they were looking. And it was fine. And then Maggie Hamlin took over, and she came along and she said, "Oh, what a lot of rubbish." And off she puffed. But she was like that. It wasn't just me. It was like everybody in the class was like that. And I really think that, like Howard, she didn't like other people very much.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that around as well. I think there was that expression, out of something comes the mother of invention. And I love that when people, like you saying you were looking in the dustbins and things like that. That's where the best things come from when it's connected to something that is deeply felt by you, which I definitely felt in your talk. That there were things that were deeply felt by you, and that is what is important, connecting to your husband, connecting to I find they're the things that really work for art, when there's a deep felt feeling of, like you've described perfectly.
And I think that's the problem, because art schools are so prescribed in the way they're taught, in the 18th, 19th century and start of the 20th. That's why we really didn't contribute, really to any serious movement, up until like the mid, 1950s, really. So I think that's what it's always held us back, because we've always had that prescribed way of working. Now, it's totally different, but it took us a long time to catch on to that, really. And that's why we were just in the shadows, really, for so many centuries, as far as making a serious contribution to the evolution of modern art, really. I think that's always been the issue in this country.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been wonderful, and as well everybody else contributing to it. You just took me on a journey, and seeing actually was that your dissertation then that you showed us?
Yeah, they called it project notes, which is like a shopping list, I suppose. It sounds like that, doesn't it? But I mean, in some ways, because that time was so bad for me, it made me think more deeply, perhaps. And it also taught me that when you go on an MA, one of the things they do is try to make you think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. Actually question, does this work, the way I'm going? But I mean, as I say, as a group, I love you all. It's when we meet like we did last Saturday afternoon. I know we weren't all there, but it matters so much to me. I really And I mean, Lisa always surprises me because she brings out things that the prisoners do, or those things with the lady who did all those with rubber gloves, or that scientist that made paintings of the coronavirus and stuff like that. You know, they're just so exciting. How can one not be excited?
Yeah, it's
So
wonderful. Oh.
thank you to you all.
Thank you. So thank you, Michelle. And sorry you had to wait kind of so long to be able to actually give your presentation. And same to you, Sarah. You know, apologies, it took so long, but you know, over to you. And I'm very excited to hear your, and I'm sure we all are, your presentation or your talk, however you want to do it.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, it's far less of a presentation than that beautiful presentation by Michelle, and I'd love to see the images that went with it sometime, Michelle. I feel like this book, the main book that I want to tell you about, some of you may already know, but I feel like it's been written for you, Michelle. You'll really love it. So it's I'll see if I can share my screen, but I don't anticipate having much more luck. Don't know, is that working?
Oh, there you are. There you are. We've got a picture up. You've done a lot better than I have.
I have a feeling it might just be a picture of that first page and not the actual document.
Right.
So I might be going backwards and forwards. But essentially, this is one of the shelves that I return to quite a lot to inspire my work, or that I go to for reference. I again also feel like the natural world, geology, time, memory, layering of histories and experiences, and the way that those are described are the things that I find of most inspiration to my books. I particularly enjoy going to poetry readings and hearing small language poetry books in other languages, and then hearing them return in their translation. That's something that I always find I get something from my work from. Anyway, so I don't know, that's not going to work. Let's see. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
It's only me with the computers that does these things.
The second time lucky. So I don't know if anybody's read any Anne Michaels. My dad gave me Fugitive Pieces 19 years ago this week for my birthday, and it's been a book I've read at least 7 times, and that I've lent out. I regularly buy new copies for other people, or books when I find them in charity shop, or hand it on. John Berger in the Observer described it as monumental and the most important book he's read for 40 years, which I think must be a fairly good recommendation. It's very multi-layered. It's all about geological time, and particularly salt and rock. The key character in it is a refugee, a Polish refugee who escapes as a small boy, and it's incredibly emotive. I haven't written anything down, so this is just my warbling on about it. I'll read you some in a moment, but I lend it to people and then they phone me up saying, how can you do this to me? You've made me cry. I'm on a train and I can't stop sobbing. But it's because it's so beautiful, so poetic. Anne Michaels is a poet, and that really comes through in the tightness of her writing. This quote is from a second book that I've got of hers, The Winter Vault, and essentially they are love stories. But this, I think, sums up for me how she writes and why it sort of touches me as an artist. She describes how pigment was made for the cave paintings, and then says, we made our paints from the bones of the animals we painted. No image forgets its origin. And there's just a really beautiful simplicity and purity about what she writes. So if you don't mind, I'll read you a section, and this is fairly random from my many versions, but many readings. I have different marks from different times that I've read it. But we have, in India there are butterflies whose folded wings look just like dry leaves. In South Africa there's a plant that is indistinguishable from the stones among which it grows, the stone copying plant. There are caterpillars that look like branches, moths that look like bark. To remain invisible, the place changes colour as it moves through sunlit water. What is the colour of a ghost? To survive was to escape fate, but if you escape your fate, whose life do you then step into? The Zohar says, all visible things will be born again invisible. The present, like a landscape, is only a small part of a mysterious narrative, a narrative of catastrophe and slow accumulation. Each life saved, genetic features to rise again in another generation. Remote causes. And now that I've started, I just want to keep on reading, but I won't do that to you.
Oh, it's beautiful, Sarah. I love it.
It is a really, it's just again and again. He writes about loss a lot. The key character, the young boy, he ran and he loses his family. And that not knowing, that sense of not knowing, and he heals through this connection of time. He describes where it is. So we think of weather as transient, changeable, and above all ephemeral, but everywhere nature remembers. Trees, for example, carry the memory of rainfall. In their rings we read ancient weather, storms, sunlight and temperatures, the growing seasons of centuries. A forest shares a history, which each tree remembers even after it's been felled. And from that to geological time and ice and melting, and yeah. So that is the book that I kind of carry with me everywhere, I suppose. That if I had to have only one book, that would be it. And I think that Robert Macfarlane and Susan Hiller are kind of the companion books to that. So this isn't my favourite Robert Macfarlane book. I prefer The Old Ways, and I've just finished reading Landscapes. But he's so keen on the language that's being lost around places. But also the landmarks is him introducing you to other writers. And I think, Jill, you might have read that one. And if not, I think you'd really like it for your walking. My extract from here is, and I suppose all this comes from me growing up in Derbyshire and walking around there, but I'm just as happy walking around in the city quite often. Anyway. Many know the moor then, but relatively few enter it, for it is vast and trackless and has a reputation for hostility at all times of year. Sea storms blow across it, funneling down through Glencoe. It's a high-level, hyena-coloured prairie, etched and roughened by glaciers, and still bearing the marks of those harrowings. Skeins of swans land on its two main locks, intricate Loch Bar and antler-shaped Loch Leyden. On a clear night from the top of one of the mountains that surround it, you can see in its uncounted lochans, streams and rivers gleaming in the moonlight. It's only at such moments that you realise how much of the moor is made of water. And again, while you were talking, Michelle, I just kept thinking, oh, these two books, this is the same as your soul, I think. And finally, just to draw those two together, I probably have had this book closer to 30 years, and doesn't time fly, whether it's, I went to see Susan Hiller exhibition, and there was the After the Freud Museum collection there. And I think that this sort of is a good illustration of kind of the quietness and the poetry of these books, these two authors that I like. It's really, there's something that's pared down to essence. It is all about observation and pairing and making metaphor, I suppose. And again, very much it comes back to this one in the book, is in the picture is water. Let me see if I can find the page now. And oh, it's there. Spirits. The writing in here is, must all things swing around again forever, or how can one escape from the wheel? This was the problem of the blind Samson when he was harnessed to the cornmill of Gaza, and it should be noted that the term cornmill was applied in Greek philosophy to the revolving heavens. Samson revolved the problem magnificently by pulling down both posts of the temple so that the roof collapsed upon everyone. The Orphics had another, quieter solution and engraved it in cipher on gold tablets, tied around the necks of their beloved dead. It was not to forget to refuse to drink the water of cypress-shaded Lethe, no matter how thirsty one might be, to accept water only from the sacred, hazel-shaded pool of memory, and thus to become immortal lords of the dead. Excused further tearings to pieces, destructions, resurrections, and rebirth. So there we go. Some hopefully brief enough introductions for you. And yeah, but yes, it felt very much like they were all three, if not things that Michelle already knew, then things that I'm glad to be able to pass on.
Excellent, thank you.
That's wonderful, Sarah. Like, really, I like the way you said calmness and poetry, and it just occurred to me that, you know, that's, I can really see you reflected in these books. Actually, it's funny, isn't it, how books and what we're drawn to are such a reflection of who we are. And I find, just occurred to me as well in this group, what's become so beautiful is, you know, kind of all those really subtle differences between us all. You know, there's so much commonality, but then there's just those subtle differences, and I think that is kind of almost like poetry. You know, it's kind of like there's so much poetry in this group, amongst how we each have found our kind of our way, our being, our kind of, you know, ways of being an artist as well. And it's such a subtle process, and it's beautiful. And I think I loved those books that you just picked, and I definitely will have to get that first one. What was it called? I did write it down.
Fugitive Pieces.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
I might have one or two copies around.
I do have a lot of Robert Macfarlane books, so I'm okay with that. And I was aware of Susan Hiller, but yeah, so thank you so much for another little eye opener for me, definitely. But yes,
I think there's just a quietness of approach that sort of ties them all together, and I think there are a lot of writers on walking and like Rebecca Solnit's and Field Guide to Getting Lost and all sorts of things. I think for me, Robert's the one who kind of draws them all together in some ways. But yeah, Field Guide to Getting Lost is a beautiful book also.
Yeah. I've actually, my holiday read as well is The Salt Path, and I think Jill had mentioned that beforehand, and I literally just read the prologue, and I'm like, you know, when you just want to sit down and forget the rest of the world and just start reading. So yeah, there is something about walking. Yeah. Anybody else?
It just feels like it was meant for you and Michelle to do yours together at the end. It's ironic, but it kind of, they just fit. They just fit so beautifully. And I can relate to all those things, but that's what's so lovely, that we're all on slightly different paths, but we can recognize the paths that other people are taking that mirror our own in a way.
Yeah, I think the whole time while Michelle was talking, I was thinking, well, that's exactly what I would say about this book, or that this book is mirroring your practice or your inquiries, your looking deeper, I think.
Well, I just remember also that Marianne and Lisa did too, that sort of echoed one another, and it just struck me as just quite moving when this happens in the group, I think.
I think we're all kind of, yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? Everything feels really calm and reflective and pensive. It's nice.
I think it is that sort of writing, and I'm drawn to it too, Sarah. That kind of, it is quiet and it's very engaged and descriptive of things happening around, but not imposing on it. It's I couldn't put it into words, but I feel like I'm drawn to that same kind of writing at the moment. It's not lecturing, and it's not imposing. It's that reflective, but it also it's kind of reminds me of figure drawing somehow. Like it's a word equivalent of drawing the figure. You know, when you're just intensely looking and trying to find the lines to describe something, and then I imagine that somehow those people are intensely looking and trying to find the words to describe. But I couldn't. But I definitely feel like I'm drawn to those same ways of reflecting about the world in a non-imposing way and a very open way.
I love the bit at the beginning when you read that part that said that the paints were made from the bones
Lovely.
of the animals that you were painting. I just felt that was just
lots of that connection, that nothing stands alone. Everything is
connected,
part of this ongoing history, and
well, nothing was wasted either.
No, I did. Well, I did a lot. One of the reasons I like the book is because I did a lot of work around caves, and it sort of quite often that book comes back to projects. So it's not the most, as you say. What it does is it reminds me and takes me off in lots of different directions again. It's a good reference book without being a reference book.
Yeah.
It's funny, a friend who's Scottish, lives in Glasgow, but they've gone up into the Highlands really, or somewhere. Anyway, she was sending me pictures of rocks, but she's a geologist. She did geology and I immediately started sending her ones back from our holiday that I'd taken of Welsh slate, because there's a lot of slate mines and stuff, and it just felt right. It just feels, that's what I've liked about the photographs in lockdown still lifes, is that people are going, well, I've made lots of jokes about, I see a leaf and I take a picture of it, but actually it's been a lot deeper than that. People have been responding, and when you saw those on the screens, the other weird thing was they started reflecting Hull in them because of the bright sunshine. But they were kind of mirroring one another. We were all doing these things so that we were all connected in some odd way. And that just somehow sums it up.
Oh, I like
I think
that.
there was a
Sorry.
I think there was a big push, a couple of years before lockdown occurred. I think there was a big push certainly amongst all the London galleries to take on this kind of slow or quiet or, deeper, more meaningful kind of art, really. It was not quite as brash as, and I think that was really picking up pace. And I think it'd be interesting to see what happens when we come out of lockdown. I think that is, part of the healing process, really, to kind of, I think you're very much of the moment there, Sarah, where you've touched on something which is important to all of us, really. Very much more of a healing process rather than an opinionated, brash kind of way of looking at the world. I think it's good for us all to reflect and take time just to absorb what's occurred and just try and recover in the most positive way we can, really. So I thought it was very much of the moment, and it certainly resonated with all of us, I'm sure with everybody else. So thank you, it was good, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
I've just realised I've got all the clocks and dials, and it just echoes a lot of those stop time. Try and get away from them, but they always come back like a truck returns. Yeah. I'd be happy to see more slow art in galleries myself. I think that's something that you all do as well. I think there's a purity of the work that I know of you all. There's quite a lot of like paring down and purity of an idea, or a quietness, even when they're talking about quite really strong subjects. Whether that's painting like yourself, Julia, that's quite full. It's still got I think, and quite strong. The stories. It's still very gentle. To me,
narrative fascinates me, hence mythology, because I think we all keep going back to the same places quite often. We repeat. It's layers of different generations, but we repeat. And there is a lot of exciting art which I go and see, and when we could go to the Royal Academy and see all the stuff that come in. There's clever art, but sometimes there's a bit of soul as some of the things that are going on, and it's lovely when you see something that you just completely get. You feel a warmth towards it. And there has been an awful lot. I did notice that, what's his name? The whale, the guy, the shark.
Damien
Hirst has started painting a blossom tree that his mother likes.
Damien Hirst.
Yeah, and his mother said, her mother had said to him, it's the first thing he's ever done she liked, which I thought was quite funny. And it was like, it looked like pointillism, actually. I mean, I know he's been doing all his bendy dots and all that stuff, but this was like, oh, right, okay, even you are subject to the...
Did anybody see the David Hockney stained glass window that's been put into the cathedral? I forget which one, whether it's Westminster or St Paul's. I think it's Westminster. Because that was quite interesting to me, because it's so full of the art that you expect to find in cathedrals, and his is just like these spring paintings that he's been doing. But the quality of light that came through, it just made you hold your breath. It just was amazing. But it was so interesting to me seeing those all against one another. This.
I think
transparency again as well. Transparency things. I'm totally. Well, am I totally irreligious? I totally revolted against everything I was brought up. But I do love churches. And I don't think I'm the only one who spends a lot of time going around churches who is exactly meant to be there, maybe. I don't know. But yeah.
I think, Sarah, I really like what you said about the calmness and the quietness and the art. And actually, when I was talking to Sarah Mole about, can't remember I think we explored what we could do for the picnic actually, but there was something that struck me, and I think what makes, what do we want to carry forward from lockdown? And I thought maybe actually of the lockdown still lives name, it's the still, that kind of calmness, that quietness, that space to reflect, because that's the one thing that people are already starting to lose, isn't it? We're already rushing around again and don't have that space to be still. And I think that really could be something that, we try and preserve either through these, these meetings and maybe who we are actually kind of enjoy and celebrate and nourish, that stillness.
One of the things I thought of going forward as an idea of what we could talk about is how much groups in art, having the companionship of other artists' ideas, has worked for us. And I thought it might be something that we could talk about, because I've been watching a lot of Sky Arts things about various groups, and as I said last week, I'd never heard of, not raw art, brutal art, what was it called?
Well, you've heard of the artists, surely.
Yes, I'd heard of the artists,
but not the name.
But I think it's quite interesting the way we influence one another and the way we draw comfort from one another, or even argue with one another and disagree. And what this group has given me is an opportunity to carry on, because I joined CAG specifically because I wanted to be around other artists. And then I ended up all on my own. And I do want to be on my own some of the time, but you need that social aspect of artists coming together and talking about things and talking about our work. And that's what this has given me. And I thought it might be an interesting thing to discuss, because we've probably all got favourite artist groups. Variety.
Let's chill, because I was wondering, because obviously we've come to the end of inspirational books, believe it or not. So yeah, we do need another.
I think just going back, sorry, Marianne. I just think that was a perfect way to end those two presentations. The perfect way to end the inspirational books, really, because it was that whole notion of reflection, that calm reflection. And like I think somebody says, a lot of people make up, desperate to get out and go wild and kind of do what they did before, back to normal, back to what they, I think, those reflections tonight have all been about us appreciating what we've got rather than what we want. I think that's what it's all about, really. Just to appreciate what we already have rather than what we aspire to or anything like that. It's time for us to rethink a little bit and cause a little bit less harm to the society and the world, I guess. It's just a two perfect presentations. I thought it was great.
Can I just say, while we've been doing the group, my little boy has made a book.
Oh,
and he's just stapled it all together.
Oh,
that's lovely.
Wow, that is very productive.
It's called Mutant Monsters.
There you are, being quiet.
He's disappeared now, so I can show, but he wants me to show you. So.
I want to say something about
the center screen so we can see. I love children's
we'd be happy to hear. So, Lisa, is it?
There you come.
Lisa, could you remind us what your little boy is called?
Miles.
Oh, here he is. He's
Miles.
popped up behind his book.
Hey, yeah, do you want to tell us about it a little bit?
Do you want to talk about it?
Well, really, I don't know how to talk about it. It's really, I just all the stuff inside. Show them.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
First page.
Oh, wow.
It needs you to be bigger, I think.
Marianne, if you take
Marianne,
me off
can you just
speaker.
put Lisa?
I'll
just
a second. I'll spotlight Lisa. And Miles.
Oh, sorry.
I get that right. Spotlight. Okay.
That's better, right?
All right.
Oh,
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I love that. Oh, it looked like a crab. Oh, it's got crab arms like the ones that pincers.
Lobster
Pincers
thing.
like on my embroidery. Oh, fantastic. Oh, right.
Oh,
Oh, wow. I love it.
Mermaid kind of
Yes.
looking,
Yeah,
isn't it?
definitely. I love it. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, that's so cute.
That one.
wow. Do they have
Wonderful.
name?
You definitely have a future.
Okay.
What are you? Or
It's
a
a-
finger, a carrot,
it's-
are you?
Are you a carrot or a finger?
That's superb. Oh, look at that. Hello.
That's,
Isn't that Miles?
that's a hand saying hello. No,
That's a
forgot
good
what that-
idea.
and that says
So
hi
nice.
hand.
Right.
My hand. Oh, right.
Well, it's not.
You, I'm watching.
Oh.
No, I am watching you. That's what it is.
Ah. That's in the
Goodness me.
the
Oh,
video.
wow.
Wow.
That's really
You've been very
nice.
busy.
Beautiful.
I think this is the perfect ending.
You
Yeah.
can't really. It's
Very.
99 and 13, but you can't see the answer. So should I tell you?
Ah, right.
Go on.
112.
Wow. Wow. Wow, there's a
Miles. Is that
Yeah.
Miles? Miles, thank you so much for the picture for our book. Listen, book. We're so happy with it. Thank you for doing it for us.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
It's very creative.
That's really nice. This was a nice one that you did.
Oh, wow.
Got to put that one in.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a jellyfish, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I like
It's a
that they're all really
jellyfish
different.
demon.
A jellyfish demon. Oh.
Oh, it looks like you're taking inspiration from nature as well, isn't it? That's really interesting.
And then it says the end.
Good.
It just says end that. It just says end actually.
Good.
Well done, mate. They're great.
Excellent. Round of applause for Mal. Thank you. That was a beautiful and perfect end to our series of inspirational books, Miles. Perfect.
That was inspirational. Very inspirational.
He's being a mutant monster.
Oh, great. So, shall we settle as the theme for the next time? So, would everybody be happy to have as a theme artist groups, artist networks, maybe? Shall we go for that?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be in Germany, but you know there is internet, so I can't see why we can't continue. So I'll create an event. And Julia, is it correct? Is it in what would you say is the title? Like artist networks, artist groups? How do we connect? How do we?
I think networks is a good, it's a good name.
Yeah, 'cause they're always going on about networking, aren't they, with artists? But I think I mean something a bit different to
Or
what.
collaborations, something like that would be a group.
Mm.
You mean more of a group, more like a.
Support.
More movement.
Okay. I'll put, because we had collaborations. That's what kicked off the whole series, isn't it, Graham? That was our very first one. So I think maybe if we see it in different acts, kind of our thing, maybe then to actually start with a similar theme from collaboration to artist networks. And it's because it's nice, isn't it? I think we've come a long way as a group, actually, as such. So to kind of look deep into artist networks, artist communities.
Artists, affinities as well, perhaps.
Sorry?
Affinities.
I missed the last.
Affinities, did you say?
Yeah.
David?
Yeah.
Affinities.
Affinities. That's a nice word. Yep. Okay, great. Good. Oh, I shall look forward to that. That'll be really interesting. I already have a few, isn't it?
I've just had all kinds of things pop in my head then.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. It'll be really interesting. Great. Okay, well, have a wonderful, balmy Wednesday evening and see you next week.
And you have a wonderful holiday. I hope you find your dad okay.
Yes.
He's okay.
you know, I just hope I get there and I've filled out all the right forms and I've got all the right documents, and I actually spent this afternoon
Take care of
uploading.
yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Take care of yourself.
Yes, it'll be interesting.
We can't do this without you.
No, we can't. And if anything happens to you, we'll all be across to find you and bring you back.
One day you have to all come, because there's plenty of space, and I think I told you about my favorite house one day, didn't I?
Yeah,
That I actually really bought and wanted to turn into artist retreats, but yeah, never mind. We keep dreaming. Right. Okay. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.